Hey guys, so when thinking about challenging situations, there's a lot of these that come up at work, especially when you're in the role of charge. So I started thinking, and recently we had a patient. She was a 13-month-old who was admitted for bronchiolitis, and she had been doing okay, but during the day started having some significant increased work of breathing. So we did decide to make her a watcher, and when we do that, the team has to put in certain criteria for us to follow, and if she hits that criteria, then we call it an MRT. So her MRT criteria was if she was having DSATs less than 90% on room air, if her respirators were consistently in the 50s, or if she was having significant increased work of breathing that included head bobbing, nasal flaring, and grunting. So this patient was on room air. She was generally staying in the low 90s for her oxygen saturations, but she would occasionally started dipping down into the mid 80s, and that's kind of how things started. She would come back up with suctioning, so we weren't super concerned, but then she started staying down in the 80s. Her respirators started getting faster. She was in the 40s to 60 range. She was having accessory muscle usage, moderate retraction. She started to seem a bit more sleepy. Heart rate started getting really elevated. She was like 170s resting and would get up to 210 when she was upset and agitated, and then she started having this stridor-like noise as well. So as a team, we just decided to call the MRT, and as the charge nurse, I have to report to all MRTs. So when the PICU arrived, they examined the patient. They really didn't seem super concerned with the patient's presentation. They kind of said that this is what we would typically see with bronchiolitis, and that the stridor-like noise that we were hearing was more of just like an upper airway squeak and from swelling and from suctioning too much. So they this is where the situation kind of got a bit more challenging. I had my superiors and the PICU telling me that this patient was fine, but something in my gut was just telling me that something was just not right with this patient, and that I really thought she needed higher care. So I knew I needed to advocate for my patient to make sure she was receiving the care that she needed. I made sure to speak up and made sure that my concerns were heard. So after a long discussion with the PICU, they decided that they really just wanted to leave her on the floor, and that they would come back and reassess her in an hour. This made things even a bit more challenging because, I mean, her heart rate was literally 170 and she was resting. I mean, this is a 13-month-old. So I really felt strongly that she needed fluids, she needed a bolus, something was just not right. I also just didn't like that stridor-like noise that she was having. So the team did decide, we ended up getting a gas, getting a chest x-ray, and giving a bolus and starting fluids. So after all of that occurred, about an hour later, the PICU did come back, and they decided that they would take the patient. And it turns out that the patient ended up on high flow and Heliox. So although the situation was challenging because I really felt like I was having to speak against my superiors, speak against the seniors, and really just voice my concerns for my patient, I think she ended up in the right place and where she needed to be.